What's up everyone? Andrew Oldar with Dirt Rider here, and we're about to get our 2020 250 4-stroke motocross shootout underway. Behind me is the KTM 250 SXF, Honda CRF 250R, Suzuki RM-Z250, Husqvarna FC 250, Yamaha YZ250F, and Kawasaki KX250. We're going to take these 6 bikes to multiple different tracks with several different test riders to see how they all stack up. Stay tuned. Finishing in 6th place is the Suzuki RM-Z250. Its engine makes the least peak horsepower and torque of all 6 bikes and is fairly mellow compared to the competition. It has good low to mid power, but signs off earlier than the other 5 bikes, making short shifting mandatory. It's one of only 2 bikes in the class to not come with electric start too. The RM-Z250's KYB components are stiff. Test riders describe them as feeling like 450 suspension on a 250F. Aside from its firm, unyielding suspension and overly rigid chassis, the RM-Z250 is fun to ride and handles fairly well. It lives up to Suzuki's reputation of being an excellent cornering machine, requiring very little additional input after the corner is initiated. Although it finished in 6th place, it's still a very good bike with plenty of potential. Despite receiving a slew of engine changes and new KYB suspension components for 2020, the Kawasaki KX250 is unable to improve upon its 5th place ranking from the past 2 years. The Green Machine's new engine has improved high RPM power over its predecessor, but it now lacks low-end grunt. The KX250 did retain some qualities from the prior engine, including its quick revving nature, crisp throttle response, and kickstarter. Although not as stiff as the Suzuki, the Kawasaki suspension is on the firm side and lacks comfort, especially at lower speeds such as in braking bumps. Test riders desired a plusher feel from both the fork and shock, especially as the day wore on and the track got rougher. The chassis is the least changed major component of the KX250 for 2020, but it remains as one of the nimblest bikes in the class with a light and small overall feel, all of which complements its neutral handling. 4th place in the 2020 250F Motocross Shootout belongs to the Honda CRF 250R. Since 2018, the Red Machine has been praised for its Showa suspension components and razor-sharp handling, but it has also been critiqued for its minimal bottom-end power. While Honda has improved the CRF 250R's low-end grunt in the past 2 years, it still lacks in this part of the power band. It does have competitive top-end power, so it needs to be ridden higher in the RPM as much as possible for it to be effective on the track. Having the most neutral and agreeable ergonomics are something the Honda is always praised for, along with being one of the most fun bikes to ride due to its light-feeling chassis and excellent cornering ability. However, it needs a better power band to be able to compete with the top 3 finishers in this comparison test. The Husqvarna FC 250 has a more distinct feel than ever in 2020 with its new model-specific suspension settings that give it the softest setup in the class. Its WP Exact air fork and WP Exact shock settings can be described as off-road, aggressive trail riding soft. While adjustments can make the WP units better and more controlled for heavier and faster riders, at a certain point, doing so adds some unwanted rigidity feedback and the components still feel a little bit bouncy. We like that Husqvarna set up the suspension on the FC250 for riders of a specific skill level and weight range, but that inherently makes it less of a well-rounded setup for a wider demographic of riders, which the suspension setup on some of the other bikes have. The FC250 revs to the moon and makes its 40.7 peak horsepower at a very high 13,900 RPM. It's a mid to top power band, but still has moderate bottom end. However, it has noticeably less low RPM grunt than the KTM 250 SXF and a more mellow overall power delivery than its orange counterpart as well. The combination of its softer suspension setup and somewhat muted power delivery put it back in the rankings just slightly, but it still has a long list of positive qualities that make it a great bike and a top 3 finisher in the 250F Motocross Shootout. In a class where a bike's overall shootout ranking is based heavily on engine performance, the Yamaha YZ250F is always a contender, being that it has one of the best power plants in the class. Whether it is indeed the best or not depends mostly on the rider's style, however. With its excellent torque feel and the most low to mid-range power of all 6 bikes, the Yamaha engine is preferred more than all the others by riders who tend to short shift, but for those who like to carry their gear as long as possible and avoid a time-consuming shift, other bikes in the class check that box, one of which also has very competitive low to mid-range power as well, and therefore has a broader power band. Other criticisms of the YZ250F are that it's not quite as nimble as the 5 other bikes and that it has somewhat awkward ergonomics. Still, the Yamaha remains one of the best all-around packages in the 250F class with the plushest suspension and very predictable handling, which enable it to clinch the runner-up spot in this comparison test. Claiming its second consecutive 250F Motocross Shootout victory is the KTM 250 SXF. It makes the most peak horsepower and is tied with the Husqvarna FC 250 for the most peak torque. The KTM's impressive dyno numbers are backed up on the track as it continues to have the fastest engine in the class. It has a mid to top power band that revs to the moon and pulls through the entire RPM range. Complementing its remarkable high RPM power is a smooth yet plentiful bottom end grunt, the second most behind the Yamaha YZ250F. The KTM's WP Exact air fork and WP Exact shock are not quite as plush as the KYB components on the YZ250F, but are very good overall. They offer an ample amount of comfort on small, low-speed acceleration chop and braking bumps, and begin to feel plusher on harder impacts such as higher speed bumps and jump landings. The 250 SXF is the lightest bike in the class at 231 pounds filled with fuel. It has a good balance of cornering ability and straight line stability, the combination of which makes for a very neutral handling motorcycle. Due to its nimbleness and how well it responds to rider input, the 250 SXF is very maneuverable and easy to put where you want it. Like the Husqvarna, the KTM is spec'd with Brembo brakes, which are the most powerful and best in the class. The bike's ODI lock-on grips are a nice touch too. So that wraps up Dirt Rider's 2020 250 4-stroke motocross shootout with the KTM 250 SXF taking its second consecutive victory. A very impressive feat, especially when you consider the fact that the Honda and the Kawasaki were heavily updated for 2020. With the KTM being the lightest, having the most horsepower, having very good suspension, the best brakes, an awesome Brembo hydraulic clutch, it's easy to see why this bike is still the top dog. For the full comparison test, head on over to dirtrider.com, and if you enjoyed watching this video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.